Welcome everyone to the first meeting of this year's Healthy Community Committee. Welcome to Lucas, who's our new member, and everyone else returning. I'm going to slightly change around the order of this agenda, if that is okay with everybody, so that we have Councillor Cryan and Jay speak them first, then Health Watch, and then we'll have a discussion about Richmond, which David is going to lead, and then we'll do the work plan. Are you happy with that? Yeah. So before we start, seeing as we are being filmed, can I get everyone to do introductions for the benefit of people watching and people here as well? So I'm Councillor Rebecca Lurie, I'm Chair of this committee and Labour member for East Southwark. Julie, do it?
Yes, I'm Julie Timbrell and I'm the Project Manager for the Healthy Community Scrutiny Committee.
Hello, I'm Councillor Bill Williams, I'm member for Rotherhithe, I'm Chair of the Rotherhithe and Burnley Community Council and member of the Health Scrutiny Committee.
Hello, I'm Councillor Lucas Green, I'm the Labour member for Grange Ward.
And I'm Councillor Paul Penning, I'm the Labour member for Faraday Ward.
I'm Councillor David Nace, I'm the Vice Chair of Health Scrutiny and the Liberal Democrat Councillor for Faraday, Cathedrals Ward.
You are no one told
Former Faraday.
I'm Councillor Maria Nace for Paul and I'm Councillor Liberal Democrat Councillor for Cathedrals Ward.
Wonderful, thank you everybody. So if we start at the top of the agenda, Jasmine, Councillor Ali is running late, hopefully she will be here later, but otherwise everyone else is here. There is a sign-in sheet somewhere going around if you can sign in, I'm sure we'll find it somewhere. I haven't had any urgent business to review, no. And does anyone have any interest in recommendations to declare? No? Wonderful. So let's move straight to our first item of business. So if we can have Councillor Cryan and Jason, we're going to have you seated here so we can get you on camera. So as a little bit of background, the personalisation review, which all the items tonight kind of fall under, is a review that we started in the last version of this committee, and we are going to finish in today's committee. And it was looking at four kind of key questions. So what's the Council's vision for personal budgets? What are our options for service delivery and how robust is safeguarding? Are service users satisfied with the way it's being introduced, and what recommendations can we make so that the journey is easier for end users? So they're the kind of four things that we were focusing on. Since we started the inquiry, Jay has started and Councillor Cryan has taken up post. So whilst we had a presentation from the last Cabinet member and the last Council officer, we're going to do it again with the new people in post and see what's going on. We're taking all papers as read, but if you want to do kind of a bit of an introduction and then we'll go into questions, that would be great.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So the main background around personalisation is that it's to support individuals to live independently and give them the empowerment to make the choices about their care and around what they do. So they should really have the choice around, and the flexibility to make those choices. They can identify the support they need so they can be healthy and safe and independent as well, and keep as well as possible. And you know, to be independent well enough to stay in their own homes as well, and also have, you know, they can decide how their support is provided for them. So it is really all around individuals taking control. And under the Care Act, there has been a massive shift away from simply just providing services. Like it's not a one-size-fits-all. It's more about what actually the individual needs and then tailoring those, and that individual being able to have those services that meets them rather than saying, here's a service, and trying to shoehorn people into those sorts of services. And there's different ways they can do that, so it's up to the individual to decide. They can get a direct payment to themselves whereby they make that choice. They can have a third party, such as the council, or another third party actually manage it for them. They still have that choice there for them, or they can have it managed totally by third party. And I have to say about 76% of people in Southwark who are on personal budgets under personalisation actually take the option to make their own choice, whether it's for a direct payment or for a managed service around that. So we have seen, you know, that 3/4 of people are actually taking that independence and actually making those decisions for themselves around that. It's also looking at shifting around what care needs, what people's care needs actually are, and actually having that conversation, that assessment with the individual to actually make sure they are getting the right needs to them as an individual as well. And there's a big, it underpins that whole well-being concept as well. It's all about making sure people are staying healthy and staying well within that. So it's not just about what their needs are, but it's around looking at the health and well-being of that individual as well on that. In Southwark, we're actually working quite closely with CCG to look at how we can deliver some unique propositions, which I think Jay will touch on in a second around that. And the other thing to remember is around with people with needs, it's rarely just an individual need, there can be multiple needs with individuals, and it's making sure they're equipped to make the right decisions to actually meet all those different complex needs that they may have.
Okay. I just thought I'd outline some of the new initiatives that we are bringing forward in Southwark. The first one is around, and these are done very much in partnership with our CCG colleagues, and we do see a lot of our future delivery around sort of partnership working with the different parts of house. The first one is around community-based support, and that's really about the retendering of home care and also district nursing. I think people often experience a sort of stepped approach to how their care is delivered, and I always think a very good example I was given of where an elderly person actually had an infected ulcer on her leg, and basically what she had to have was a home carer come in the morning to get her up, give her a bath, take the old dressing off and put a dry dressing on, district nurse to come in to give her a dressing, new dressing for that next 24 hours, and then a community physio to give her some therapy to ensure that she was more stable on her legs, wasn't going to fall. What invariably happened was that the physio turned up first, wasn't able to give her an exercise program because she hadn't got out of bed. They spent most of the time doing that. Then the district nurse came in and did the dressing, and then the home carer came in and took the dressing off and gave her a bath. I'm slightly tongue-in-cheek, but actually that is often the experience that things are out of sync, because there are many different components to people's care. Community-based support is actually looking to a Dutch model, where far more is taken on board by one individual with extended roles. So we've had conversations with our CCG colleagues and agreed that that's a good way forward, and we're currently in discussions between our commissioners to draw up a broad specification that would look at that, at the potential of that being delivered by one person with the overview of professionals. And then after we've done that, we'll be going to the GST2, which is our community health provider, and the private sector, the home carers, to start to build in and start to look at how we might extend competencies around that area, meaning that the individual in the new system would get most of their care delivered by one individual, but actually with the oversight of the professionals as and when needed to be drawn down. The out-of-hospital pathway is our biggest in terms of numbers of people going through the system, and although it says out-of-hospital, that basically means anything that's not in hospital. That's sort of the wrong way around. It's not a very good title. I always think it should be called about community support again, but because we have one of those already, we had to call it something else. So anything that's not happening out, so that's everything from how people get discharged into the community from hospital, the types of services. We do a re-ablement program, and we're currently mapping all the services that are currently provided, looking at some blocks that might be in the system and how that can be much more freed up. It's also looking at admission avoidance around people, how we can stop people going into hospital unnecessarily. So it's looking at that whole pathway, and that's looking at both GST2 staff and also social care staff working together under a single line. And we're sort of 3/4 of the way through that process. Hope to come up with recommendations within the next couple of months. Our mental health services are currently we're reviewing those at the moment, and coming up with a strategy that again shared with CCG, looking at a much more primary care focused mental health program to hopefully less reliant on acute services. And I think they say there's no health without mental health, and the whole concept of trying to actually give people the tools to maintain their well-being and their mental health, and then if they do have a crisis, that's sorted out as quickly as possible and as close to home as possible without the need to go into acute care unless that's necessary. So again, we're working through that at this point in time. And then there's a project which is really part of South East London's process called Local Care Networks, and this is really driven from the primary care services, but very much in partnership with the local authorities and others, about how we might deliver geographically specific care around people in the community. So making care local again, and very much trying to work from the basis of people's community, and how we can look at community resilience locally and actually embed our staff in those communities. We've settled on 2 federations in Southwark, a North and a South, and we're starting to see the picture on how services within the community can be focused around those to support the population in those areas. And it helps build relationships up with professionals if we try and do that. So all these things interlink. So the things I talked about, the community support, you'd replicate within this process. So you'd have teams that are based around those geographical patches and are able to deliver services locally. We're also doing work on the marketplace and our IT systems. Currently we're focusing on the introduction of the new IT system. Children's Services went live on Monday. And as I did say previously to some of the audience, where adult services are going live on October, and that will be a completely new client pathway. But we're also looking at things about our local offer, which is something we have to do under the Care Act. And there is an obligation that we provide a very robust information process so that members of the public can access that. And we're working with a consultancy at the moment so it can be as easy as possible. I think I've learned about the 3-click rule, that you can't, if you're looking for anything, you've got to find it in 3 clicks or else you lose interest, which is quite interesting given some of the topics some of our service users want to find, trying to get to 3 clicks. Yes, we're looking at that and we're developing that, particularly in partnership with Children's Services, so we hope there'll be a common process between the two sides of social care between adults and children, and we're looking at how we can work together. So in summary, personalisation is a very strong concept. It's one that fits very strongly both as a service, but also within the frontline staff, within the local care network that we're trying to develop, and ensuring really that people's experiences of adult social care are geared around them and they are central to that process, and not that they feel they've done too, but rather they feel they have a control over their whole care pathway.
Wonderful, thank you. If I can literally ask the first question and then I'll open up. What kind of challenges do you think that we've got with the introduction of personalisation? Obviously, you're relatively new and post still, James, if you're obviously new to the role, and having come in and seen how we've been operating, do you think there are things that we need to fix, or there are things that we should be doing differently?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there are challenges moving forward. We have both Health and ourselves have a smaller envelope in which to function on. And I've been very clear with my lead counsellor that the only way we're going to be able to deliver a service that is responsive and enables people who are vulnerable to live as full a life as possible is in partnership. I mean, I think that's a really strong challenge, that we have to look at how we deliver services in the most cost-effective way, that we use the public purse in its broadest sense to the best advantages for the citizens of Southwark. And I'm always struck by, I remember, a very, very big paper that was done where someone was asked on integrated services, did you find social care good, did you find healthcare? And the answer was very straightforward, was saying, I didn't care who delivered it to me. I wanted what I wanted, I got what I wanted when I wanted it, and it was quality. And I think, that's really, really a big issue, that we have to deliver integrated services. I think they find it really complicated to jump between health and social care. They are big partners in adult social care. They are our health colleagues, and we have to work really strongly with them. Saying that, the council have made some really brave things. We're one of only 2 councils in London that have an ethical care charter around domiciliary support, and I think it's about us making sure that we really tap into that and make sure that we answer many of the common questions or complaints that people have had, which is about inconsistent care delivery. people not spending the whole time, and the quality of those carers. And I think we have a real opportunity to do something very positive in Southwark, but it is going to mean that there's going to have to be a big shift in the marketplace and how services are delivered. But it is an opportunity there. But those are some big issues really.
We were discussing today around how we need to look at how to shift things. And I'm like Joanne, I think believe in working in partnerships. We have, working in public health and with the CCG to make sure that we are doing what is best for the person, not what's best for us. It has to be, the individual has to be at the heart of everything that we do.
I've got a couple of questions. Let's start with first with the e-marketplace. So I don't know if you've seen the CATS report. Yeah. So obviously it's one of their strong recommendations, and obviously you've informed us that you sort of started the process, or you sort of signed up in principle. Is that my understanding?
We've started the process. I don't think we've actually agreed which way we're going to go yet, but we've certainly started. We've asked someone to give Joy the certification so far to have a look at that.
So I mean, in principle though, is it something that is definitely going to go ahead, and what is your thoughts about the other aspect of the coin, which is around almost something like a TripAdvisor sort of ability to comment on the providers, and so you can get positive feedback, I guess, about whether people are happy with the services they're receiving from various organisations and providers, and I guess putting up things like CQC ratings and things like that. And I mean, is their sort of vision that they've talked about here the same vision that you have?
I think ultimately, yes. I think what I said, we're currently focusing on the introduction of the framework I system. We're also focusing on the directory to start off with, which is the general directory. But we would very much like to move to the opportunity of actually having that e-marketplace in its purest sense. But it is a staged approach, and we're doing things as in a project management process. There has been very limited work done on the e-marketplace as a concept, because we've got to get our providers right first of all and get them in a position they can actually engage in it. But I completely support what you're saying. I have no issue with it whatsoever. But I'm saying currently in Southwark they've concentrated on the front door, because they feel that's actually got a broader attraction to people. Because e-marketplaces, if you look at the write-ups they've done around the country, I don't know if the person-to-person marketplaces is one firm that delivers this. You do find it tends to be much more focused on younger adults and people who are actually taking direct payments and how they actually use those services. I think the only exception to that I've seen is actually in, I think it's Yorkshire, and it's called Selwyn, and it's been constructed where they use the marketplace in a much more broad, and actually for some reason they've managed to get a lot of people in the older age group to actually engage with the marketplace, but it's very much that they act as brokers to those people and actually make it much easier. But there's some really exciting opportunities there, and we will be working towards that, but I couldn't sit here honestly and say that we're on that road to developing that yet. We've certainly got it on the list of things we want to develop.
My view also is we need to get the digital solution part right as well, because the art is that many people are digitally excluded, which means we have an e-market, which I do like the concept of, I really do, is the fact that it needs to be ready for everybody to use, and it would be a shame to preclude some people because they are excluded digitally. So I think that's a piece of work that would need to be looked at alongside that, because it just means that not everybody can access the same information if they can't go online, or they don't know how to go online, or just can't afford to go online.
And that's actually what Salvin's done. They've done a tablet-based formula where the council employs them to go out to older people's houses and sit with the tablets and actually organise it, and and that's where they've got the pick up from. But there is a cost involved with that.
Second one is around one of the things that Richmond have done or have got in place, and it seems to echo with some of the complaints that I've received when I've been going around into the day centres and things, particularly I'm thinking going back a bit now to the voluntary day centres, etc. There's always been an issue about about the process of being assessed and then waiting for a decision to find out what your budget will be, etc. And then the time to get the services in place, etc. And Richmond have some service standards and timescales for that whole process, and they also have a commitment that just one officer will take you through that whole journey. So you will have a sort of nominated officer who will effectively go throughout the whole, deal with you throughout the assessment and on to confirmation that you've got a personal budget, etc. I mean, is that something that you, what are your thoughts about us introducing those sorts of standards and timescales?
Yeah, the really good news about that is when I got here, we do have one officer, it's the reopenment team, because everybody comes through the reopenment process. When I arrived here, there was 260 people on their waiting list, which was a huge amount, which meant an awful delay. And what happened was people got various sort of, they got temporary care packages in place, which weren't satisfactory because it built in dependency and actually didn't give people a proper choice. We're down to 20 people now, and people are being assessed within a 2-week period.
Are you happy in principle to sign up to some sort of standards and timescales?
We're going through a whole process of mapping pathways, and that would come under the out-of-hospital pathway that I talked about as one of the big developments here. So when we do that, we will put quality standards and indicators around those types of things, so time frames, and targets for assessments to be completed by and things like that. So those indicators will be put in place as the pathway is written up. But I think it's important to say that those indicators have to be signed up not only by us but also by our health colleagues. If we're trying to establish what someone's needs are, we can only do that with the support of our health colleagues who give them the ability to regain as much independence as possible first. Danger is putting services in too quickly, and that way what you do is actually disable people. So we're working on that. Guidance and Thomas's community trust are signed up to that, and in fact we've had 2 workshops already, and we've got our 3rd workshop planned in the next 2 weeks. And once we do that, we'll be putting quality standards against those. But the good news is there's almost no waiting list now.
Can I ask about those questions? Do you know what those standards are likely to look like? Do you have some idea of what you want to get to? Does the Richmond kind of case
I haven't seen the actual data. I mean, my experience of how you would look at that is look at we'll have to look at the number of people that will flow through there, and then the number of staff that we have to do those assessments, and how we can move people through the system. But generally speaking, I mean, we would hope to start an assessment within a time frame. So the usual sort of standard would be between, I don't know, about 10 working days, I would suggest, depending on the urgency of the particular case. But I would suggest that we're looking at something. It's wrong of me to start guessing because it's got to be a negotiated thing between ourselves. But it would be that sort of level, and that's not for urgent people. That's for people who've travelled out and are going through the system. So you'd put a quality standard in about that. It's difficult to say how long it would take, depending on the complexity of the case.
I mean, just for reference, the Richmond thing is they will tell you if you're eligible for support within 3 working days of your referral.
Well, that's slightly different. That's actually the front door, and that would be a. Sorry, I'm really not being. I was trying to establish what you were asking, because if it's eligible, you should be you should be told almost immediately as you go through the system. Because if you're not eligible, you'd say, well, we can tell from those questions you've answered, because we'd ask around activities of daily living, and you can actually exclude someone quite quickly. Generally speaking, there's a rapid response approach, which at most quality standards are around 2 hours. And then beyond that, you start going through a further system, which would be, I said 10 days, but I'm making a guesstimate there. So there are levels of assessment that you go through, but depending on what your needs were. Because clearly, if you're in crisis and you've got someone on the floor, you can't say, we're going to be with you within 5 to 10 days. You know.
Is Richmond 2 weeks? Is that what you're saying?
Well, they go on to say you have a support plan will be completed within 4 weeks.
Okay.
Once we agree that services should be provided to yourself within a maximum of 8 weeks.
6 weeks is probably the target they're using for intermediate care, and they've added 2 on.
But in principle, those
are the sorts of standards. They're pretty standard for most of London now, those sorts of levels.
We don't formally have that as a council at the moment.
Not that I'm aware of, no. Oh. And the customer journey is something that I've looked at since I've been here, and that's why I've done the work with GST to try and get that to be much more split, basically.
I think once that, there's the pathway to the out-of-hospital pathways are looked at, then there does need to be some set of standards then, and agreed set of standards then.
I hopefully it's about making personalisation a positive experience.
Well, if we're asking people to actually make the choices and be independent, we do need to make it as easy and as positive for people as possible. Yeah, exactly, because we are actually enabling people to make that decision, so therefore it should be quite seamless for them as well. Okay.
Lucas?
I'm going to let Bill go first, because Bill's got a follow-up
Yes,
question.
the quality assurance framework is what I would have called it. I'm assuming we're going to be working in partnership with our partners to bring that to fruition. Is there a time frame? And if so, what is it?
We are hoping that by October we will have agreed the path. By October this year we will have agreed the whole pathway.
Yeah.
I can't tell you at this point in time whether all parts of the path will be coming at once, because one of the debates we're having is whether we go for a big bang and we change everything all at once, which might be part of it, or whether we go for a number of staggered stops. And obviously that will be discussed as we go through the process.
And a tiny follow-up to the follow-up is, are you using any other similar authorities as a benchmark to start you off?
We've looked at a number of the different projects around the country.
Sure.
There's a thing called the I-cases, which are done by the department, by NHS England, which give you good examples, and there are about 24 of those that we can look at. We've also employed someone called from Oxford Brookes, who are actually supporting many of the pioneer projects. And we're bringing we brought those people on board, and they're the people who are facilitating the workshop. And so I'm sort of slightly talking to them, saying it's an incremental process. But although I've talked about organisations, the one thing I would be very clear about, and I firmly believe, is that you can have as many things on a nice glossy piece of paper as you like, but if your frontline staff have not signed up to the issue, that's all that will remain in that glossy book. And why I've taken some time when I got here is that it took me quite a while to convince some partners that that's who should be designing the pathway, the frontline staff and service users. Because if they buy into it, they'll make it work far more than I ever will. I can give a vision and say this is what I want it to look like, but actually the frontline staff, and they really are starting to buy into it. I mean, I've been majorly impressed with the frontline staff in Greenwich. I've been majorly impressed.
Well, I wouldn't have heard it,
I've been really majorly impressed with them.
Thank you.
They're very good.
Thank you. Mine is on a slightly different subject, and Councillor Crime might be able to help with this one. Going from being a ward councillor to being a cabinet member responsible for this, is there any advice you can give us as ward councillors ways that we can support this?
We actually, yes. We were talking about today. We're looking at for all members to do some training around what really should be sort of forwarded up to adult social care, and maybe it may not be adult social care but a different department. So we're actually looking at sitting down and devising some member training for all members to help support you. We're on the doorstep when you talk to people and do home visits, and have people get in touch with you as well. So that is something that we've not got to the stage where we've sort of sat down and decided what to do. We're just sort of talking about getting some training on board for all councillors down. And I think it's really important that we do.
I think there's a bigger role that we can play.
Yeah, exactly.
Help us do that.
Exactly. Because you are, I mean, more and more, especially it's on the doorstep, lots of the issues that we deal with as ward councillors do fall under sort of health issues as well. So, yeah. Definitely.
Maria?
Yes, thanks. Most of the questions have been covered, but it's something that I have been very concerned from the beginning on e-marketplace, and it was the enormous amount of people in Southwark that are obviously either illiterate in IT and computers, or they don't have access to internet. And it's not only the clients who suffer from that, but it's also the carers are in the same situation. I can see, and you mentioned a minute ago, that you are going to ensure that is going to be a fact that you are going to analyze and try to ensure that the people are going to be taken care of. If the people who do not understand the internet or don't have access to the internet are going to take care. But nevertheless, I'm very concerned because of the enormous amount of people that are illiterate on computers.
I think you're right, and I think
access to the internet.
Yeah, and I think it's a big piece. It covers more than adult care. It covers across the board. Because so many things are now digital by default. a lot of the population are excluded from things. And that's why I'm saying, you know, I think the e-work is a really good idea, but it can't be the preferred, because there are people who can't go online, and you're totally right, and I think we do need to have a level playing field and actually have other resources around to help those people, either support them to go online, or if they just can't, then to have that same information to get to them, and whether it be that, you know, a home care worker helps them with it, or goes around with a tablet, you know, or their daycare centre helps them, you know, those are the things we've got to look at as well. But you're totally right, we do need to realise that there is a large part of the population that do not have access to a computer, or just don't know how to use them. Yeah.
Or the case, for example, that the client suffers from dementia.
Yeah.
And the carer, who could be the daughter or son or partner or whatever, don't have the time, literally don't have the time to look after the mother or father or whatever, and at the same time do some work, paid work, to go into the internet.
No, I think, yeah, and I think any solution that came out from that would need to take that on board and look at ways to address that. So, you know, we're not at that stage yet, but I do think that is something that does need to be very much considered, yeah.
Thank you.
Apologies for lateness, Chair. I've just got a couple of questions, and apologies if they've already been asked. But I'm reading well, Chair, I was thinking about your paper, and I was looking at the disparity between the paper and, you know, the report from Southwark, you know, on personalisation. And a part of me thinks that, you know, the e-marketplace, which has been in place for such a long time, not just for Southwark, but, you know, for all local authorities. And personalisation now, you know, we have to keep, every time we look at it, we have to keep reminding ourselves what it is, if we ever knew what it was. So I'm wondering, on the one hand, you've got the disparity between the council, key strategic partners and users. On the other, I was just wondering what you thought about the issues of loneliness and, you know, a lot of people in adult social care that you have to deal with. And are these processes just getting in the way of good social work here? I just wondered what, I couldn't really get from the paper your personal vision, which is obviously very important because of where you are.
I think that I firmly believe that we're on a strong footing to get personalisation right in Southwark. And I think the pathway, starting from the pathway, is the really important thing. And I know it sounds probably a bit corny, and I've probably heard it all before, but the process of the pathway is to function before form. And I think lots of the problems we've had in the past is that we've tended to look at what we've got and then try and rejig it slightly, and you still end up with the same chess pieces on out there. What we've tried to do with this new way of working, and it's been a bit scary for the staff, is say, okay, let's try and think of the best way that, you know, what would, and I don't think it's wrong, it might sound a bit sort of, you know, emotionally based, but use the mum test, you know, how would I want mum to travel through this, and what experience would I like that person to have? Yeah, you know, I think it's a good test to use, and the staff are really good at pinpointing exactly where processes aren't working and where they cause, so that moment where the social workers pulling their hair out on a Friday afternoon trying to get someone safe, or the district nurses going in to dress something, they can see the person's lonely and depressed. And so we've tried to do the out-of-hospital pathway in that way, and staff have found that very liberating. And so what we've done is we're now starting to come up with a solution that we feel would best match those around but what that does is it's quite scary for staff, because staff will say, well, I can't see my job in there because I've just redesigned this. I've redesigned this out of the pathway. So, but I think it's a really positive. I think it's a really positive thing for the service user, and I think it does develop a pathway. So I think the pathway planning is a really important part of the personalisation process to get it right for the individual and get those things around there. And we're doing that with our colleagues. So that's really positive. I think in terms of resources, I think that's really part and parcel of what we've got to talk about in the future, about how we make sure the public purse goes as far as possible. You know, we will not be able to provide the same services we are with the budget that's smaller. We just physically can't. We can't do it. So what we've got to make sure of is whatever we do provide is really targeted well, and actually think slightly broader. I mean, you talked about the digital inclusion. You know, we have library staff out here. You know, actually we've got to be much more creative within the council and saying, well, how can we utilise the resources we have within us? You know, maybe they can't go get access to a computer because of money, finances, or maybe they just don't know how to use it. But actually, is there anything wrong with training our staff up, our library staff, to say, well, actually, they can do that? And I think that's the willingness of adult social care. Is we really want to try and utilise all the resources within the council. You know, we're really lucky we have public health on board. They have huge amounts of resources to map out those needs and those issues for us. And we have to make sure we use all those facilities to make sure all of it works well. And I say commissioners have got a really, on both sides, on health and social care, have got a real challenge on trying to shape that marketplace to get the best value for money out of the public purse, so we can still make sure that whether it's just someone needing someone to talk to because they have no opportunity for interaction, or whether it's a very disabled person who needs a multiple of types of input and is housebound, you know, you've got to make sure all those services are actually available to people.
Well, we presumably will still be able to maintain people in their own homes under the new financial arrangements.
Absolutely, but again, it's about being clever with IT. I'm not saying that, but you know, making sure that every social worker sits down and thinks about things like the telecare and telemedicine. So actually, you know, do you really need to have a nighttime visit if you can put a sensor on the door and you use a GPS tracker and things like that? You know, you can use technology to try and support you, and how you actually deliver these packages. You know, it's about being creative with what we've got, and we are going to have to really think outside the box. You know, the King's report came out and it said, you know, if you want something to be lean and save about 10%, then you can do that. That's what lean working or smart working is. We're in the transformational mode. We need to think about 30% savings, things like that. That's the sort of level over a number of years we need to think about. So we've really got to think transformationally in how we deliver services, and we cannot continue to deliver services. There just aren't enough people to deliver it. It's not about whether we will or not. There just aren't enough people out there to deliver it as we're delivering now. We've got to think of more creative ways.
Unless anyone else has got any more questions, then I think thank you very much for coming. And if you move on to after you go ahead and move to the mic, we're going to pause for a second. Are we?